Hey, this is Corey Goebel, and I wanted to share four takeaways from this module's readings related to improving teacher decision making for effective instruction. These recommendations are geared toward teacher leaders and those that may be interested in designing professional development to better facilitate teacher decision making. Students are diverse and classroom contexts are diverse. So it only makes sense that the teacher's instructional decisions should be flexible. Teachers should be able to adjust their instruction either on the fly and within the planning process to, to meet the needs of all students. So considering how and why teachers do the things that they do and the decisions that they make within the classroom should be a major consideration for any teacher training or professional development. So first, there are a lot of terms that this may be, uh, this process may go by, whether it be metacognition, reflectivity, or even reflexivity in some contexts, depending on whether you're talking about the individual interacting with other individuals from their particular stance and biases, or whether it just be planning ahead or even reflecting upon the lesson itself. But all of these things fall within the umbrella of teacher metacognition. So teachers being active and deliberate in thinking about what they're doing, not only when they're doing it, but also after they do it and before. So all of that falls within this umbrella, I believe, even though there are particular differences, from definition to definition. But all within the uh, the goal of effective teaching, focusing on why teachers make the decisions that they do. So these decisions should be purposeful, deliberate, student focused, and with goals in mind. And according to Duffy um, and others, metacognition is perhaps a teacher's greatest skill. So supporting teacher reflection on their practice is an essential thing for developing effective teachers. And to do so, teachers need time, resources, professional development, and leadership to help facilitate this process. In PD, the context can't be ignored. So training should be authentic and connected to a teacher's own classroom and students. So Duffy recommended for professional development an educative model. So in that it's teacher driven. It encourages criticism of current practices and recommendations, very much led by the teacher themselves and even reviewing perhaps videos of their own practice. It's a long-term thing. So we're talking about months or years, not a one and done session like most professional development sessions are. And it does need to be authentic. So preferably occurring within the context of the classroom that teacher is going to be doing the things that they do. Recommendation number two is protecting teacher autonomy. And personally, this is a pretty big deal to me when an administrator respects the teacher as a professional to make decisions according to the training and experience that they have. And I suppose I'm blessed at the high school level, at least in my own context, to have administrators that truly value teacher input and opinion and are trusted for the most part to do their jobs. But some of the schools that I've been associated with, particularly at the elementary level, a lot of administrators really like to maybe micromanage what it is that teachers do. In fact, whenever I used to sub for my mom in kindergarten, uh, they would have literal booklets where it had a line by line what the teachers were reading and when for a particular lesson. But teacher autonomy, though, is something that's necessary for fostering effective decision making. So it's something that lends to student-focused practice, according to Parsons and others. Overly focusing on things like standards and testing actually works to inhibit autonomy and work against the development of adaptive or flexible decision making. So it ends up sort of backfiring on that approach to make sure that these teachers are doing what they're supposed to, in quotations, at any given time within the classroom works to reduce the likelihood that teachers will be making effective decisions about what they're doing for their students in their classroom, with the ultimate goal of doing well perhaps on those standardized tests. Institutional focus on prescriptive teaching actually works against that goal. So that's supported by Duffy and others as well. This approach fails to consider the unpredictability of the classroom context. So you can't be expected to have a script and it work out okay for everyone everywhere. Recommendation number 3 is establishing a mentorship or coaching model. Many schools have these in place, but it may not necessarily represent what is supported by research. So given that teachers are metacognitive professionals, this is a progressive skill, something that can be accelerated by collaboration. So teachers don't necessarily start out as experts, of course. They need time to develop that, and that can be accelerated by working closely with those deemed effective teachers already. So adaptive teaching is highly situational, and mentorship and coaching can foster effective decision making in real time. So if the teacher is actively with another teacher as they're making those decisions about a particular context in a particular classroom with real students, that makes a big difference. So teacher experience is correlated with effective teaching and decision making. So this is also supported by cognitive research into how students learn. So Evans, 2008, and How Students Learn 1 and 2, published in 2000 and 2018 as the second iteration. Automatic retrieval, which draws from relevant experience, results in faster recognition and response. Effective teacher training then should facilitate a reduction in the cognitive load that novice teachers experience when dealing with what can sometimes be seemingly overwhelming classroom craziness. So in other words, what this means is that as teachers become more experienced within a particular context, they get better at making these decisions. And this is something that, if paired with effective mentorship and coaching, can happen a lot faster. Teachers see these effective decisions in real time. Recommendation number 4 is to structure an environment which reduces cognitive load. So tying in with that last one, a teacher's affect has a direct impact on effective decision making. So this is Blackley and others. So just having a positive affect is associated with reduced cognitive load. And a reduced cognitive load is associated with more effective and positive student interactions and generally a more positive classroom environment. So that might be easier said than done. Just always just be happy, I guess. But that can be facilitated directly by having first clear and established rules and consequences. So a teacher may sort of become frozen in the moment when they're having to consider all of the things that need or could be done in the particular situation to deal with a particular student behavior. But having consistent rules for particular things that are consistent not just in the classroom themselves, but perhaps across the school. So if this is a teacher leader facilitating this, then having those rules in place can sort of reduce the teacher frustration in that situation. So they're like, okay, this is the consequence for this, and then they move on. So sort of taking the mental struggle away from it in that case. Having experience with processing information in similar context, in similar situations, is something that can be supported by that mentoring and coaching process. But generally speaking, the more practice a teacher has dealing with things, the less that they have to think about them in the future. So then effective decisions can happen more often when the teacher's not quite so overwhelmed. So from a cognitive standpoint, teachers only have so much working memory. That is, these system 2 or more deliberate and sort of concentration type activities that at first occupy all of their working memory. But as routine becomes established and teachers have experience dealing with particular situations within their own classroom context, some of that can kind of be automated, shifting it away from their working memory, releasing that working memory for dealing with things related to instruction and student learning. So improving the likelihood that effective decisions will be made. And that positive affect can be gained through reflection on practice too. Some structured opportunities are needed and with explicit expectations for teachers to actually reflect on their practice. So rather than just telling teachers this is an expectation, perhaps allotting time for these things, outside of the actual instructional time, and preferably not taking away from a teacher's planning period. And these practices may also improve through intentional focus on positive instructional aspects. So focusing on the good things that are occurring, affirming student behavior, and talking positively, generally speaking. So those types of things can facilitate a positive affect by teachers, and therefore a reduced cognitive load, lending to better decision making. There is a caution though. Of course, overly prescriptive routines, like we talked about before, can actually be counterproductive. So considering these rules that the school may adopt and the consequences that go along with them, there must be a balance somewhere in there that favors teachers as metacognitive professionals. So teachers still need to be allotted with freedom to do things according to they perceive them within their classroom environment, things that are reasonable and not be locked into particular practices. But that's what I've got for recommendations for teacher leaders, and thanks for listening.